Welcome everyone to Going D1 Real Recruiting Stories. We're joined today with my good friend and soon to be relation, Jose Vazquez. And we're excited to have him. He's been in baseball for a very long time and would love to hear all about his journey and also his involvement now in the youth sports. And so we're really excited to have you, Jose, and welcome. So I don't know what you'd like me to focus on in your bio. It's extensive, but at the end of the day, you played baseball at Tennessee. You played baseball in junior college, and you've been a Rangers strength coach for what, 20 years?
18.
18 years, so not quite 20. But so anyways, thanks for joining us, and would love to hear your thoughts. I think maybe
Why don't we? I mean, we could start with just him and himself and talk about you going through high school, finding a place to play in junior college, and then going to Tennessee, and sort of how all that developed.
Yeah, I can do like a little intro background on myself, and then I can go into my baseball story.
Awesome.
Sounds great.
So I wanted to begin by giving you guys a little bit of my intro. So originally, I'm from Puerto Rico. Grew up in Miami. I went to high school at Southwest Miami, where I played high school football and baseball. I went to Central Florida Junior College for 2 years. I played baseball for the University of Tennessee for 2 years. Got drafted by the St. Louis Cardinals in 42nd round. Played a couple of years there. Went to independent ball for about a month before I got released by the Duluth Dukes in Minnesota, and went to spring training in 1995 with the Milwaukee Brewers. After that, I went to physical therapy school. As soon as I graduated from physical therapy school, I started training baseball players at night. And after a few years of networking and just studying strength and conditioning, I got a job with the New York Mets as the assistant strength coach. I was there for 4 years. And then in 2005, I became the head strength coach for the Texas Rangers. And I just finished my 18th year as a strength coach. I am now beginning the new phase of my baseball career as a special assistant advisor. Currently trying to find out what that entails, but that's my background. I've been in baseball since I was 5 years old, and I'm still in baseball. And I still have I feel like my passion is to not necessarily coach baseball, but to help players, families, organizations, anybody understand what baseball is and how to perform at the highest level, and how to be okay whether you're elite or not. There's a place for you, and there's a way to enjoy this journey if you have the right perspective and utilize all the resources available. And so my mission is just to help people understand how to get better, at whatever they decide to do, and whatever level they're at, high school, youth, college, pro, whatever level they're at, there's always a way to get better. And so, but when I was 12 years old, we moved to Miami, and uh, I was interested in a lot of sports. So I played a lot of different sports, but baseball seemed to be the main one. And, but I continued to play baseball and football in high school. And so those two were my main sports. But at the end of my senior year, I realized that baseball was going to turn out a little bit better than football because of injuries, and just the opportunities were a little different. And so my senior year, I had a really good baseball season, but I didn't get many offers. I wasn't highly recruited. Miami in the late 80s was a hotbed for baseball. Um, you know, the three main universities at the time that everybody wanted to go to was Florida State, Florida, and Miami. Those were the three top schools. Every kid in Miami wanted to go to one of those three schools. Um, but but also the other thing that was well known at the time, junior colleges of Florida were powerhouses too. They were good feeders for all those three schools. And so if you weren't highly recruited and you weren't a Division I prospect at the time, there was always that hope that some of these junior colleges would get you to Division I. And so
So
uh,
sorry, what do you mind telling us what position you played, or positions plural?
oh yeah, I played outfield.
Got it.
At that point I was mainly an outfielder.
Were you more of were you stronger defensively or offensively?
Offensively.
Okay.
Yeah, because well, this is good topic to talk about. So I grew up playing infield. I always wanted to be a second baseman. Growing up, all the guys that I looked up to in the 70s and early 80s, they were all second basemen. So I wanted to play second base. But when I got to high school, the starting second baseman was an upperclassman, and he was pretty good. So they suggested I move positions because I wasn't going to play until my senior year, and so I didn't want to do that, and so I started to they put me at third base, and when I moved to third base, I developed the yips,
Mm,
and um, and so that became a nightmare, as
yeah.
many players that have had the yips know. You know, I because I felt like I was a good fielder. I wasn't afraid of the ground ball. I could pick anything. I could get in front of everything. I was really good in getting in front of the ball and going and getting the ball, but I just couldn't find first base. I mean, throwing to first base was a nightmare. And so obviously when you get the yips, that's a unique situation that you need certain kind of help. I mean, not many guys overcome that by themselves. And at the time, uh, people knew what it was, but they really they weren't going to take the time to help me.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know what, this guy sucks. So let's move on. Um, and so, and of course, I didn't have the nicest coach either. He wasn't a very warm and fuzzy guy. And so, instead of helping me, what he would do, he would make fun of me. And so it became, you know, an embarrassing thing. And so they thought, okay, well, let's put him at first base, because I can catch the ball. I can catch ground balls. I can pick it, but you still got to throw home. You still got to throw to second base on double plays. You still got to take infield, outfield. You got to throw the ball around the infield. There's still a lot of throwing involved, at least during practice. Maybe not during the game, but during practice. Um, and so that was a nightmare too, because like, dang, you know, I couldn't throw the ball around either. And so
What year was this again?
that was my sophomore year is when I got the yips, and then my junior year they put me in at first base because thinking that I could just handle that.
Okay,
Um,
got it.
and but obviously because of the yips and that all that stuff, my hitting went down too because I had zero confidence. So because you know
Right.
you show up to baseball practice and you're playing catch and um, it's a nightmare just to play catch.
Yeah.
Uh, but and then so my senior year I was gonna quit. I was gonna just play football and run track. I was pretty fast, and so I had okay ability for football. And but my best friend said, "Hey, no, don't quit. Let's just do it together. Let's just finish out our high school career. Let's just you know let's just keep going." So I was like, okay, fine. Um, and I can't remember exactly why I ended up in right field, but I I I went back in the fall and I started to play catch and it felt okay. And I thought, I can do long toss.
Yeah.
And then I was like, you know what? If I can hit the cutoff man, then I can do this. And
Yeah.
so it I thought, yeah, this will work. And so I got better. I got better at least playing long toss, and at least I can play long toss and I can hit the cutoff man. And because I did have a good arm, so I did I did fit the part. I could throw as a right fielder. I had a right fielder type arm that they're like, all right, we'll stick him out there. He runs fast and that works. So it worked for me. So now I got over the yips, and so I was able to concentrate on hitting. And so
So
then
senior year, you had a good
yeah.
year in high school, and then how'd you find your spot at the junior college?
So I there was a bunch of school, there was so many schools in Miami. I mean, in the Florida area, anyways. But there was three in Miami called Miami-Dade South North. There was three of them, and so those three were powerhouses. So any kid that wanted to go to UM uh, would go to one of those. And so I would ask I would ask my high school coach, who was new that year, and I would ask him, hey, let's go. I would go to the bathroom in fifth period. I would sneak out, go to his classroom, and say, "Hey, come on, let's go call some schools." So we would go. He would leave his classroom, and we both go to the principal's office and make phone calls to different colleges to
Wow.
try to get some feelers out, Uh, and we did that for several weeks, all kinds of schools and different junior colleges until finally one day he came up to me and goes, "Hey, Miami-Dade South is going to offer you a scholarship." Um, and so I was like, "All right, cool, let's go." I That was a really good school at the time. As a matter of fact, the head coach, I think his name is Charlie Green, if I remember, ended up being a long time college coach. I think amateur baseball college Hall of Fame, the guy that
Oh,
coached for a long time. Um, and so
and
I
so,
went there.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So anyways, I took the scholarship, which just so that everyone knows, when you're in state, junior college scholarships are very cheap. Everybody gets a scholarship. So that's another thing that I found, that I went there thinking, oh man, I'm special. I got a scholarship, but so does 60 other guys.
Right.
And so I get there
There
and
were a ton
there's,
of guys in the program.
yeah,
Oh wow.
that school was so popular that, they could, I mean, they had like the leftovers from the good Division 1. So there was a lot of guys drafted out of that program over the years. A lot of major league guys came out of that program. Um, so it was well known for turning out pros, because there were all the leftovers from,
Yeah.
guys that were really good, but they couldn't get past. They weren't. They didn't have the grades to go to Division 1.
Okay.
Uh,
Right.
so it was one of those schools,
And
and because they
so,
had so many people, they could pick and choose. They didn't really have to um, really worry about uh, really recruiting. People just,
yeah,
but they can just say, "Hey, you got a scholarship."
yeah.
So I went there, and I found myself with all these guys, and I'm thinking, "Dang, I'm not going to play." Um, and so at the end of the fall, they asked me if I would redshirt, and I thought, no, I don't want to redshirt, because I know that my timing for getting drafted, or I don't want to be a 21-year-old freshman or 22-year-old redshirt freshman at a
Right.
junior. And so I went back to my high school coach, and we called on some more junior colleges. And it so happened that Central Florida Community College needed an outfielder. One of their guys got hurt in the fall, and they needed an outfielder. And it so happened that one of the guys that I played with in high school had gone there and walked on there. And so my coach had a connection there. So he called that coach, and they're like, "Yeah, come on, you qualify for financial aid, and um, it's still junior colleges in state are pretty cheap." So I thought, okay, I'll take the chance and go over there.
So that
And so
happened. That happened after basically in the winter of your freshman year.
yes, yeah.
Okay.
So I moved, yeah. So like this happened in the fall semester my freshman year,
Right.
and then over the winter, or at the end of the fall, I knew that they wanted me to redshirt, so I decided I didn't want to.
Yeah.
So I started to look at other colleges, and so I was able to find a spot
Yeah.
at Central Florida Community College.
And then did you get like right into the team your freshman year at Central Florida, or yeah?
Yeah, so I went there, and the guy that was hurt um, was about to come back, but he just wasn't playing well. And the coach stuck me in there, and I just started hitting, and that was the end of it. I never came out again. Um, and
Never
so
get hurt. That's the moral of the story.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, and so I that year I hit, I want to say like 420. Um, I was all state. I went to the all state all-star game. And so at the end of that year, I got a full scholarship with apartment and all the other things. Sometimes when you're out of town, uh, part of the scholarship is an apartment, which that was a big deal for me to get my sophomore year. So my sophomore year, I had a full scholarship, full everything. My
Yeah.
freshman year,
That's
when I
awesome.
went over there, I was sleeping on that couch
Yeah.
Right.
because everybody had rooms, everybody had apartments. I couldn't afford an apartment by myself, or so I was sleeping on the couch. My friend's apartment, who he already had a roommate, but it was a two-bedroom, so I was sleeping on the couch. Um, that freshman year, so my sophomore year to have my own room
Yeah.
with a scholarship, that was a big deal.
Yeah. That's awesome. And you you played again there for your sophomore year, is that correct? And then Tennessee after that?
Yeah, so my sophomore year I did really well again. I had even more 440. So I was now getting some letters, some interest, but I still, this is the one thing I feel like I want to stress to everybody that listens to this. As a player, you're gonna have to do your homework, and you're gonna have to pursue this. You can't expect people to be knocking down your door unless you're a super elite athlete that everybody knows about you. So what I did, because I already had that experience in high school where I told my coach, hey, let's go call some people. I did the same thing here. My girlfriend at the time, I told her, hey, let's write letters to all the SEC schools and Florida State. So I wrote all the SEC schools a letter with my stats, showing my interest. And so we mailed out all those letters. And sure enough, pretty much everybody got back to me. Florida State, Florida, SEC. I'm sorry, Tennessee. And there was a couple of good division schools in the area. One was Florida Southern at the time. I don't know if it still exists. Uh, but Florida came came down and offered me half a scholarship. And that was my first choice. I wanted to go to Florida because I wanted to stay in that general area of Gainesville, Ocala. And then one day I was practicing, and the assistant coach called me in the office like, hey, Tennessee called and they said they want to offer you a full scholarship. They're going to call you tonight when you get back to the apartment.
Wow.
So sure enough, the coach from Tennessee called me and offered me a full scholarship.
Wow. And that was at what point during your sophomore year was that? Or was that after your full sophomore season?
That was sometime during the season.
Okay. Okay. During the season.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Cool. Wow. And then yeah, and so you obviously took the offer to go to Tennessee, and so you went to Tennessee to start the fall semester, I assume. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did that go moving from a junior college to, an SEC program, and yeah, what was that adjustment like?
Uh, well, at first it felt like I had it going on. I mean, I went into the fall and I was hitting. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't miss a beat. I was doing really, really well. Um, but then the season started and I began to struggle a little, and the coach started to pull me out of the lineup and moving me around in the lineup, and like a lot of players when you're promised something and somehow something changes and you see something else, you feel lied to, you feel let down. That got in my head. And so it got in my head to the point where I just didn't recover. The whole season I was a mess. Um I could not hit, I couldn't do anything. And so it but that little letdown
A little bit of
got
doubt.
in my head. Yeah, yeah. And that is the one thing that, looking back, and this is my message to a lot of people, to even big league guys today, is you gotta believe in what you're good at. If you're really good at something, just because you go into a little slump or you go down a little bit and you're rough patch, if you believe in your strengths and you continue to go out there and compete with your strength, you usually come out of it.
Hmm.
Uh, and so that year, that minor situation, it really messed me up mentally, and I didn't have a very good season. I was on the verge of quitting again, like a lot of people. When you don't have a good season, you want to quit. I mean, that's just normal behavior. But I went back. Uh, I had a different approach. I wasn't going to be as I told myself that I was not going to be persuaded or influenced by what the coach thought. And I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, that you don't respect your coaches and you don't listen to your coaches. But it was more of a conversation for myself to, uh, no matter what happens, I'm going to play my game. I'm going to do what I do. I'm going to focus on what I do well. And if it doesn't work out, I'm not going to worry about what people say or what the coach says or uh, what they promised or not promised.
Hmm.
I went back with the attitude that I was gonna play my game the way that I can play, and if that wasn't good enough, that wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
But I set out to not be affected by anything else other than my own work.
And so did that help you out with your last year?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because uh, as a matter of fact, because of the previous year, my conversation with my coach, he had told me that I was going to be these certain things. I was going to uh, be the fourth batter, and all he wanted me to do was X, Y, and Z, and I thought I was doing that, but all of a sudden I wasn't in the lineup, and so I realized, you know what, it doesn't matter what he says. I just got to go out there and put up numbers,
Yeah.
and I got to let my bat do the talking. So when the next year came, I didn't I didn't go to the meeting. I avoided the meeting. I thought, nothing that this guy says to me is going to change my mind about what I'm going to do.
Hmm.
He's not gonna. Nothing that he's. There's nothing he can say to me that I'm going to that is going to influence the way I go about my work,
Yeah.
and it's not going to change anything. And so we had a conversation, but we didn't have a meeting. I just listened to what he had to say, and I moved on.
Yeah.
It's interesting how you've had a wide range of experiences with different coaches, and the fact that you had a high school coach willing to get on the phone and call these guys is incredible, especially after you graduated and came back to them. I think that says a lot for his commitment, and then just dealing with the expectations at Tennessee. And I'm curious, did they change the financial package the second your senior year, or was it the same scholarship and everything was the same in terms of what they're providing for you, or was it so the only difference was your on-field
Mhm.
uh, expectations?
Yeah. So okay. So going back to the original offer, so I was offered a full scholarship. Uh, but then I guess because in baseball there's not that many full scholarships,
Sure.
he he decided that he needed some of my money to get other players. And so he asked me if I had financial aid, which at the time I didn't understand this, but yes, I did get a lot of financial aid from being in Florida. But when
Yeah.
when you go out of state, you don't qualify for financial aid in certain states.
Oh,
And so I didn't qualify. So after I had told them, yes, take some of my money and use it for other players so we can get a better team, I I found out later that I didn't get uh,
right.
financial aid. And so, but he provided a part-time job down in Miami that made up for the money. So he still helped me with get the whole rest of the money. But I ended up with an 85% scholarship. Um, anyways, which is pretty high in Division I baseball.
It's
And
very high. It's very high. But he didn't change it your senior year despite sort of the performance junior year.
yeah,
Because one of the reason I asked that is because Gunnar has had a lot of conversations with teammates over the years about the coaches essentially saying, "Hey, you can keep your scholarship. You're just never going to get on the field." Or also other guys where they're just like, "Hey, your scholarship's pulled, and you can stay and play or go to school, whatever. But we're sorry, we got to give it to somebody else." So there's been a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of that in baseball in particular.
mhm,
But
Yeah.
yeah,
so it's great that they honored it for 2 years. And I
mhm,
do think too, and maybe you could address this, is junior college is extremely helpful for the development period where the D1 coaches aren't going to use you as much. And so there's almost like this added benefit of going to junior college or going to a lower division school because the coach bypasses the scholarship cost of the 2 years that you're not going to play, or the red shirt year, or whatever it is. So there's a added bonus of picking you up out of junior college, or Division II to Division I, or even Division III to Division I. So it's
All
kind
right.
of interesting dynamic. So basically I was commenting on the fact that coaches sometimes withdraw scholarships. Sometimes they essentially say you're not going to play, but we'll keep your scholarships. They do a lot of things to, I guess, basically remove players from the team. But it sounds like your experience at Tennessee was much more, uh, I guess, fair and valuable, given their response to maybe production they weren't happy with your junior year.
yeah. So I will say that was a good gesture on their part. At that point, you know, I don't remember cutting scholarships and that kind of action as common as it is today. Um, I don't know why they kept me. I don't know why they kept it this. I don't know. I just know that I didn't perform up to my capability that junior year, and I wouldn't have seen any reason. Uh, I would have been okay if well, not okay, but I would have accepted the fact that they took something away because I didn't perform. Uh,
Sure.
but at that point, it didn't seem like there was a lot of that going on. Maybe there's more of that stuff going on today. I think also the fact that kids could just get on the portal and leave whenever. I think there's a
Right.
lot more of that, and I think that a lot of that stuff is going to be more commonplace because of the UIL rules and all that stuff. Players have less commitment to the school, so why should the coach have commitment to the player?
Right.
Uh, so I think it kind of goes both ways. Now, uh, my my message to all baseball players too is you cannot put your faith in the coach to keep you or not keep you, or you have to prove it to them. You have to put up numbers. You have to perform. If you want to keep your job, you have to perform. And so, um, a lot of players, me in particular, I I put my faith in what he said that one year, and then when it didn't happen, it really influenced the way that I thought, and it created all kinds of mental problems for me, and I ended up not performing. And so I think all players need to really have the approach that for my scholarship, my playing time, all that stuff is up to me. It's up to me to perform. It's up to me to get mentally ready. And the biggest thing that players also need to do is learn how to filter all the things that can take away what you're really good at. Figure out a way to really hone in on what you're really good at as a player, and then you go out there and you compete with what you're good at. A lot of times comments, social media comments, looking what other people are doing, what the coach said or what he didn't say. You know, he looked at me that way. I've heard all kinds of stories. And so, you know, you can't be influenced by what people think about you as a player. You have to really find a way to really embrace what you're good at, and you go out there and you compete with that. And then what you're not good at, you practice and you keep working on it. But in this day and age, we have way too much information, a lot more resources, a lot more understanding of the mental game, a lot more understanding of the things that keep us from becoming the player that we could be. And so I think that junior colleges are, for me, a good starting point for any baseball player that doesn't think that he's going to be able to play at the university level that they want. If your favorite school is whatever it is, and you know you're not going to play there until your senior year, well, you got to ask yourself, do you want to be at that school or do you want to play baseball? And so junior college is a good way to find out whether you can play or not. A lot of junior college, there's a lot of high-level junior colleges that you're playing against high-level competition, because a lot of times those are kids that their grades were not good enough for Division Ones. So you're playing with studs anyways.
Yeah.
So you really have some good competition. It's cheap. It's affordable in most cases if you're in state. And you got 2 years. You got 2 years to figure out whether you got what it takes to go to Division One. So it's like a prep time that you can evaluate your talent and say, yeah, you know what, I belong there. Or you know what, maybe I need to go to Division Two, or I need to go to Division Three, or but a lot of times kids, they get so they fall in love with what other people are doing in social media, and they want to go to a certain school just because. You got to be honest with yourself, is if you cannot start at a Division One program, go to junior college, spend a year or two there, and then see where that gets you. So
So you would say um, resiliency, I guess, is the word that kept coming to my mind in terms of players' mental makeup. There has to be a tremendous amount of resiliency in the face of varying opinions and coaches having different things to say, whether it's good or bad, and then realistically evaluating yourself, whether or not you're already a D1 high level D1 prospect, or whether you need to go to JUCO and develop further. I think that's really valuable for most athletes. Very few kids are fully developed, when they're 16, 17 years old. And so it's really hard I think the coaches have a hard time evaluating who's going to be good as a junior or senior in college anyways. So I think there's a lot of wisdom to that insight and that approach. And, I think I would also mention that depending on the sport and depending on, what school you want to go to, there are some schools that are really active in the transfer portal, really active in getting transfer students. And then there are some schools that don't do it at all, really. So it is kind of, that was one of the things that, as we looked at Bowden's options coming out of junior college for football, some of the schools just really weren't even really looking. And it's a very small handful of colleges, but it does impact it. So overall, like, you had a great journey. You had some really supportive coaches in a lot of ways. That you did have one guy you said was making fun of you, which isn't great. But a lot of the other guys, helping you, calling the schools, it's fantastic. So, and then you ended up getting drafted out of Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
So your senior year went very well, and then tell us a little bit about that process, or was there something else you wanted to ask?
I remember you telling me about the story about how you got drafted by the Cardinals, and you said that you just like got a letter in the mail one day because it was back in the day, and you were just like, oh, cool, all right, I guess I got drafted.
Yeah. So, yeah, and again, I think these stories are really good for the perspective of a lot of young players, amateur players, and parents who want their kids to go on and at different levels, because a lot of times we have this vision of how things are going to be, and we have these dreams and expectations how these things are going to be, and a lot of times life doesn't turn out the way we think, especially sports. And so I had a really good senior year, um, because I had a really good fall my junior year. I had talked to different, I have, through conversations, I was told that I was going to be a higher draft pick as a junior out of
Right.
college. And, you know, I thought, that I had a really good year my senior year, but I was a year older, which meant that I
Right.
didn't have any leverage. So they didn't have to draft me as high because I either signed at that point, you sign or you're done. And
Yeah.
so, um, you know, but because I was All America, I thought, well, surely to goodness, the first two guys that were ahead of me in the All America list were drafted high. So the guys that were drafted ahead of me, I had as good numbers as they did, and I thought, I know I'm a senior, but maybe maybe I won't get drafted in the top 10, but maybe in the 20s or whatever. Well, I never got a call. I never got a message. I got nothing. I got a call from my brother because at that time I was still at Tennessee. I was still in Knoxville, and I got a call from my brother. Hey, you got a letter here from the Cardinals, and I'm like, okay, well, open it. And it was a telegram. It was a telegram saying that I've been drafted in the 42nd round by the St. Louis Cardinals. That I was gonna get a phone call from them, and I think that it was like, man, your signing bonus, your signing bonus is $1,000. And stupid me, I'm thinking, okay, cool, I can negotiate.
Yeah.
uh, but so I got a call from the scout, and I started to negotiate. He goes, really, you don't have any leverage to negotiate. This is it. You either sign or you don't play baseball. And so, okay, so I figured, okay, this is what I wanted. This is what it is. So I signed, and I I was assigned to Johnson City, Tennessee, and that facility was awful. I mean, coming from Division I SEC program where everything was brand new, top of the line kind of thing. I go play at this place in the sticks. It's a little more built up now, but it was the worst facilities I've ever been in, even high school. And I thought, wow, this is professional baseball. This is terrible. Um, but anyways, so I did play a couple of years in the minor leagues with the Cardinals, and I I went on to try. I tried independent ball. That didn't work out. I went to spring training with the Brewers one more time, and that didn't work out. So then at that point, I realized age wise and physically, I didn't think I could keep up. So I decided to give it up.
I
But
think, yeah, that's cool. I think that an interesting way to look at it, or an interesting perspective, would also be how you've sort of seen the recruiting from the other side, and having been with the Rangers for so long. Um, in terms of like that, like a professional, a major league organization, as they're looking at guys in high school and in college and essentially recruiting them, I guess, what are some of the biggest things that you've seen from, from the other side?
um, well, now that I'm on the other side, it's important for all kids to understand that the way they carry themselves matters. Their lifestyle, the way they practice, their body language when they practice, uh, you know, what kind of student they are, what what kind of teammate they are. They really look heavily on the intangibles. At least we do. We have all kinds of tests that they do on guys now on with the Rangers that it speaks a lot to the character of the guy because it's easy to find the physical tools. I mean, you can sit in the stands and you can time somebody run and you can uh, time a fastball and you can see somebody hit and you can see all kinds of things. But then, you find out that this guy's always late and he's very disrespectful, and he has a bad background. Those are all things that influence their decision. And, a lot of money has been spent on guys with poor character. And it drove the organization crazy. And they spent a lot of money and resources on trying to get these guys to the big leagues. And it just, it just didn't work out. So there's a lot of emphasis on character nowadays, because I feel like there's a lot less talent to go around. There's the combination of all the things. I mean, there's only so many spots in the big leagues, so they can pick whoever and then move on. And, it's everybody wants the same thing. So there's only room for so many. So they're always trying to weed out the bad apples. And because the physical always shows is just the behind the scenes stuff that we hear all the time on ESPN. This guy got arrested for this, and this guy got in a car crash, and this guy, slapped his girlfriend, or there's so many things that go on that a lot of teams, a lot of organizations, they focus on that a lot more than in years past.
Yeah, I can imagine that I mean, it's just bad for business, quite honestly, that when you're fighting the headline flow from your star players, and even if it's minor stuff, you don't really need the negative press unless they're substantially head and shoulders above everyone else. And then you got to start evaluating what kind of product it generates for the fans as well, because at the end of the day, it's also, all of it is a product. It's all entertainment for other people. And so then, if you're not compelling as a player because you're nasty or whatever, then it just decreases your value, number one as a teammate, but number two as a product for either the university or the pro team or the high school team, even.
Yeah. And
I,
and I've even seen, and I know we did this, followed guys on social media, see what kind of social media life they had. We had people that actually looked at that stuff and
Yeah.
follow up with guys throughout the system and see what kind of social media life some of these guys had. And that too came into play.
I mean, I remember seeing from the college level, I remember seeing something going around social media a couple of years ago about Vanderbilt and their coach Tim Corbin, I think, who's created one of the most successful college baseball programs in the United States. And it was basically just saying that, like, when you're recruiting somebody, or when he's recruiting a player, or one of his coaches is recruiting a player, they want to go into that team's locker room and see how a high school kid keeps their locker and like their space, and if they're organized or if there's stuff thrown everywhere, or how they take care of themselves, how they take care of the locker room, how they if they're respectful, organized, that kind of thing, because that's like you said, like you can find the physical tools anywhere, but there's so much stuff that goes on outside of that really does make a difference.
Yeah. And I've been in meetings and I've had this conversation with many fringe major league guys that maybe we're in the bubble and I was trying to persuade them to work a little harder or think a little different or um I've been in meetings where the team has to make a decision. They have two players that are very similar talent, but one's really hardworking and one is not. One is good character, one is not. One is coachable, one is not. I have seen it lots of times where they always take the guy with good character because they figure if we take this guy, we can coach him. He's going to work with us. I think this is going to be a lot safer bet. But we take this guy, he brings this baggage and that thing, and he's hard to coach and he's hard to talk to. So I've seen a lot of decisions being made on the intangibles alone, not the physical,
Yeah.
because the big leagues is very hard for everybody. Uh, only the elite kind of seem like they have it all together, and even then, it's hard for them. But for the most guys are grinding to try to stay up there and trying to belong and make it, and so organizations are constantly trying to make decisions on the best man. Who's the best man up there? And all right, this guy works hard. This guy's coachable. Let's take this guy. Let's forget about that guy. And even if they're not necessarily making a cutthroat decision where like, oh, let's get rid of this guy. But eventually this guy falls out of favor and he'll get traded or he'll go away in a few years. But I've been in many, many meetings where the guy with good character is the one chosen.
I mean, that's good to hear, because I know that from my perspective, sometimes it doesn't always seem that way, but it's good to hear that it does go that way when it matters the most, and in terms of big leagues, and in terms of if you're going to stay with an organization when you're in the minors or all that kind of thing. Because I mean, I know the D-backs have told us before, like if it's you against somebody else and you guys are on the brink of one of you being released or one of you staying, then we're gonna lean towards the person who does all their reps, who does their reps hard, and who is a good teammate, who's not obnoxious and rude, and actually works with the coaches, and yeah, that kind of thing. So it's it's good to it's good to hear that is valued, because yeah, sometimes I don't know. I'm sure people have seen, like, in the media, like Dad was talking about, like, people, there are news stories about the guys with bad character who are superstars, and sometimes someone's good enough at a sport that a team is willing to take on that risk, and
Mhm.
yeah, sometimes it may pay off, sometimes maybe not, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, the way I put it, and this is true across all sports, you can have a bad character guy that is a superstar, you can handle that. But if you have a bad character guy that is a so-so player, he's kind of a fringe average player, that's not going to fly very long. And unfortunately, we've all seen it throughout history. You got these guys that are just such bad men, but they're so good. They're so talented
Yeah.
that the teams are always willing to take a risk because when those guys are on the field, they're special. The rest of the time is a nightmare. Uh, so even though most good men are going to value character, unfortunately, talent always supersedes that.
Yeah.
And I would like to say that the majority of those conversations went the character way. The reason sometimes it doesn't go that way is because a lot of these bad character guys at some point they were considered super talented and there was a lot of money invested in them. A lot of people's jobs are on the line for the development of this player. A lot of people careers are at stake because of this player. So there's a lot of behind the scenes things that happen that sometimes we don't know. And now that I'm on the other side, I have seen, but and it's unfortunate, but I think character still stands, and most organizations, they want to go with the character guy. Sometimes they just can't do it just because there's way too many things at stake. But character, in my opinion, still counts for
I
most
think
organizations.
it's also that it's also important to note that, as you said, you could be a superstar with bad character, or you could be average or maybe above average with bad character, and one's going to work and one's not. And I think that it's worth pointing out that the chance of someone having bad character and being talented enough to override that character is very, very low compared to just having good character. And then you're giving yourself a lot better chances of sticking around, rather than really relying on being an unbelievable player at whatever it is.
And I have seen average players have good careers too. Like,
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, the good friend of mine, Joe McEwen, he's now with the Cardinals as a bench coach. He was in the minor leagues with me, and this guy, they called him Super Joe because he would do everything, but he also was super good to everybody. I mean, this guy greeted the parking lot attendant, the secretary. He brought donuts to people back when donuts were okay, But like, I mean, this guy was a super guy. I mean, the best teammate, best clubhouse guy. But this guy was 5'7", 5'8", 155 pounds, and he had the best career average against Randy Johnson of
Wow.
anybody, and he was willing to do anything. He played
Yeah.
catcher. He did everything. And
Yeah.
in the big leagues, he did play every position at one point during the season. This guy was willing to do everything, and he was just a little skinny guy, but was super attitude, super character guy. Played in the big leagues, I want to say like 7-8 years. He's been a big league manager for a long time, has had a really good baseball career just because he had a super attitude, and he was a super character guy. So I still got some good
Yeah.
memories of guys like that I've been across, that I've been around, that they rubbed off on me, that I like, dang, I wish I was like that guy a little bit more myself. But it still happens. Character still counts. And I still feel like that is the best choice when it comes to deciding on players. Just go with character. If equal talent, good character, go with character.
Awesome. Let's shift gears to, if you don't mind, the current sort of youth baseball, or you could talk about volleyball as well, but I'm curious what you think about the current youth baseball programs, and how you think, as a parent, as a father of a developing youth talent, um, what is it that you're trying to accomplish with Kian in terms of where he should go, and whether or not a Division I scholarship is the goal, or if it's more of a pro goal, or if it's just enjoyment. And I will say that from all the Division I coaches I've ever talked to, none of them think enjoyment is anything but winning. So
Yeah. Okay, so I'll speak as a father, but also as a coach, and taking into consideration all the things that I've been exposed to as a player, as a coach, taking all of that. My encouragement to all aspiring parents with kids that are going through the amateur ranks, select baseball, select volleyball. The number one thing I always told myself is I always wanted to listen to the kids and see what they wanted, and if Kian tells me, what, Dad, I want to go to Division I. Okay, well then that's our goal. That's our end goal. these are some of the things that we need to start doing now. So I've always listened to kind of what they were interested in and what their passion was, so I can maybe join them in that. Number two, I feel that even though I want to make it I want to make it fun for him, and I want to stress fun, but I also want to always walk alongside him, helping him understand that this is going to be hard, and it's not going to be as easy as you think. Um, it takes a lot of effort, physically and mentally. We talk a lot about right perspective, right expectations, because a lot of what parents do with young athletes is they make them feel like their kid is the next Mike Trout, and they're not. And then this kid has a high expectation of himself, and then he doesn't make the high school team, and then his life is shattered because, wait a minute, my dad always told me I was Mike Trout. So I think that parents need to have a healthy conversation with their kids about where that kid is at developmentally, and try to do things that are appropriate for them. And maybe not, you don't want to put them down too much. No, you're not Mike Trout. You're never going to be Mike Trout. That's not it. But also, you don't want to pump them up full of lies so that the kids have the wrong perspective. And so I've always tried to tell Kean that, because sometimes with Kean will have a really good game, and he would say, "Dad, man, I'm really good at baseball, right?" I said, "Yeah, you're really good today. Now we got to do it again tomorrow." And so we celebrated that day. We celebrated those hits, but okay, now you got to do it again tomorrow. You got to do it again next week to be really good. Yeah. He and I had this conversation the other day. He asked me, "Dad, would it be good if I made varsity as a freshman?" And I was like, "You know what? That's a good question. I think that I'm glad that you're thinking that way. But honestly, in my experience, the only thing you would get out of making the team as a freshman is bragging rights, because nobody's going to sign you as a freshman. So unless you're going to start as a freshman, unless you're going to play every day as a freshman, it's not going to do you any good to make to make the varsity as a freshman. Because you have to have, I said, to be a good baseball player, be a good athlete, you have to have two things. You have to have the physical body to play that position, or that, you can't expect to go to play Division I basketball if you're 5'6". So if you're 6'5", okay, you got the physical body. So I said, all right, Ken, you're tall enough to play first base and pitcher already, and I think you'll get taller. So I think physically you're going to be there. Now the second part of that is you're gonna have to put up numbers. You're gonna have to put up numbers your freshman year. You're gonna have to put up numbers your sophomore year, your junior. So your expectation, your idea of playing varsity, it's a good one, but it's really not the goal. The goal is show up every year and put up numbers. You got to perform. And so keeping that conversation going where, all right, physically you're getting there. Performance-wise, you're getting there. You're working on your swing. You're working on your delivery. You're doing all the mechanical stuff necessary for your age. And so I want to continue to give him the right perspective about what he's really walking into.
Right.
Because kids, they get into it, they don't make the team, or they have a bad season, or they have 2 strikeouts, or whatever failure comes along with. Then they're like, wait a minute, I thought you told me I was good. Well, you are good, but you just had a bad game. You are good, but you just had a bad season. Or you know what? Perhaps instead of you trying to make the select team, the majors team, which is the top level ones, how about we play AAA or AA team where you play every day, and so maybe play at a lower level team so that you can get some repetitions in, you get some more at bats instead of sitting on the bench on the majors team. How about we play in the AA team and we get some at bats, and see if maybe in 2 years you're 6'5", or you're or whatever. Like you got to kind of have realistic expectations or conversations about how hard the game really is, what you're really good at, what you're not so good at yet. Um, you know, continue to listen to. I spend more time trying to work on his ability to deal with failure in practice and in the game. Um, when he doesn't do well at something, making sure that he doesn't go down the dark or rabbit hole thinking that he's the worst hitter ever. And I know, you know what? Those were just bad pitches. Your swing was good, but the pitch selection was not as good. Um, so being able to break down the game, because there's a lot of times that kids, I even try to coach them on how to practice. I've seen it. I see this a lot, especially in baseball. The kid goes to batting practice, and the coach is throwing terrible, throwing the
Right.
ball all over the place, and the kid is taking pitches, and the coach goes, "Come on, let's go swing." So now the kid starts swinging at bad pitches. Your swing is only as good as the pitch you selected. So if you
Right.
swung at a bad pitch, your swing is going to be bad. And
Yeah.
then now the coach is irritated. Now you're irritated because you're getting bad swings. And so you go home, man, I'm terrible. I had a bad practice. No, your coach was terrible and you swung at bad pitches. Therefore, that's why your swing was bad. Because your swing did not change in one afternoon.
No, Gunnar
You know,
can attest to bad pitching from his dad to really sabotage his hitting.
yeah. And so when I practice with Kian and I make a bad pitch and I make him do something, you know what, man? That was my bad. That was a bad pitch on my part. You shouldn't have swung at that pitch. But so those are the kinds of ideas that
Right.
parents need to communicate to their kids. It's not you're never going to know if your kid is good or not until they get there.
Yeah.
Until they get to your senior year in high school, you're not going to know. So
Yeah.
why not walk through the failures and make sure that they're learning something from every failure? Was it your swing that was bad? Was it your swing decision that was bad? Was it that your coach was throwing balls in the dirt? That doesn't make you a good hitter or a bad hitter because of batting practice. Or you go to the game, you swing at a bad pitch. Well, you only had 2 at bats today, so sorry, you missed you missed the opportunity to get a hit. That doesn't mean you're a bad hitter. So like there's a lot that goes to it, and just to have teach them the right perspective about what they're
Right.
getting into and what they're not. And so I knock on wood, I say right now to this day, Kian still enjoys the game. Kian bounces back from failure pretty good. Is he going to be good? I don't know. Does he have a good swing? I think he does. I think he's going to throw hard. I think there's potential there, but he'll ask me, Dad, am I going to be good? I don't know. It's up to you. You know. But does
Yeah,
he
I
have the
think
physical tools? I think so. I think so. But
it's interesting. You make a good point in terms of one of the things that I really struggled to assess with Gunnar and Bowden, and also somewhat with Torsten, is that you got to get them on a team where they're going to play and be pushed. So you don't want them to be the number one guy, but you also don't want them to be on the bench. And so it's, as parents, I think that's one of the more valuable things you can help them with, is guide them to a team where they're going to get repetition and improvement, and they will have, the coaching is important, but if you're never on the court or field or whatever it is, it doesn't help. So you need to kind of focus on finding a spot for where your son or daughter is at the moment, not where you want them to be. And I think that can be difficult, and I think that's a crucial piece of it. And then you kind of go back to the resiliency in terms of youth sports, that being critical. And I think I've seen a lot of parents that are drinking the Kool-Aid, and some coach that's hyped your kid, and I've seen this in particularly in baseball and football, where parents say kind of things like, "Oh, well, they're going to get drafted after high school," or something. I'm like, do you have any idea how hard that is? Like, it's not a normal outcome for anybody. And I think having the right perspective as a parent is critical.
That's a very hard combination because I struggle with the girls to find that. And I've struggled with that with my son. And so what I've began to do, especially with because I understand baseball a little bit better than volleyball. What I started to do with him is to point out the part that he could control versus the things that he couldn't control. We talk a lot about in sports nowadays, everything's about mental health. And I feel like there's a component of mental health that is more physiological, more health related. But the majority, in my opinion, the majority is thinking about the right things at the right time, the right way. And so Kian's played in some teams that were, some of them were pretty good, some of them were just terrible. And so when Kian would say to me, "Hey, Dad, this team is terrible. I just can't do this. I just can't do that." I said, "Okay, well, when you were at the plate, did somebody throw a ball at you? Right? Okay, well, did you hit it? No. Okay, well then, when you were hitting and the pitcher throws the ball to you, you try to hit that ball as hard as you can and you try to get a hit. Once that's over, it doesn't matter what your other teammates do. You can't help how they play, but you can help how you play." And so my point being is whatever sport your kid is in, whether they're in the top majors team or they're at level one, every sport has some specific skills that are individual to each player. And if you do those well often enough and you repeat that often enough, you're going to get better. And then maybe you might not be able to get in a better team that year, but you maybe get in a better team next year. So, when it comes to hitting, okay, well, if you have really, really good at bats and you see the ball well and you hit it hard and, now the ball goes through the infield, now it goes to the outfield, now you hit home runs, all those things, they start adding up. And then, okay, wait a minute, maybe next year you play in a higher level team. If it's football, okay, well, your alignment will hit that guy across from you as hard as you can. If the quarterback can't throw the ball, you can't help that. And so you try to create a game within the game for your kid so that your kid doesn't focus on the winning and the losing just because he's in a bad team or in a lesser team. I said, well, if you do your part really, really well, you're going to get better. And then perhaps the next year we can go to a higher level team. And it's an ongoing thing when it comes to select sports. I mean, select sports, everybody's got a good team, and every team we were on, it disbands every year. So a lot of times we were just having to find new teams just because it disbanded.
Right.
And some teams, they were good, and so Kian was fine. And then some teams that were so bad that I'm like, all right, Kian, you got to block that guy, that kid that's kind of an attitude problem. You got to block that. Just because this guy can't catch the ball when you pitch, you got to block that. You still got to throw a strike. You still got to try to hit that strike zone. After you throw the ball, you got no control. So I start teaching him the mental part of the game. You can only control your part. You control when you swing. You can throw when you throw the ball. You can throw when you catch the ball. And so I always kind of keep his mind focused on the things that he can do, focused on the things that he can control. Because I know as a parent, it's hard to find them the right team with the right coach. I mean, right now I have a friend that has a volleyball, a girl that's a volleyball player starting out 11 years old. This coach yells at them, berates them on the court, tells them they're going to start, and then they get to the game and they don't start. They'll play 3 games on Saturday and the girl won't see the court. 11 years old. It's developmental volleyball. I mean, these parents are going crazy. Well, this is it's a terrible situation. I don't condone it, but this is an opportunity for those parents, and this is my conversation with them, is to start putting thoughts in her head about what can you control. Okay, when you're in practice, are you doing these things? When you practice, concentrate on hitting it this way or being in this position. And so you can't control sometimes you can't control the kind of teams you end up on, but what you can do as a parent is try to keep your kid thinking about their particular responsibility and how they can focus on that and control that. And that's the game that they have to play every day. And because the guys that are ultimately successful are the ones that can block out all those other things and focus on that one pitch focus on that one play, focus on that one hit, and those are the good ones. And so you can develop your kid's ability to focus on their particular responsibility, even if they're on a bad team.
Yeah, it's actually, quite honestly, that's one of the best components that children learn in sports, is that you have to perform within a context of a team. And although baseball is an individual sport, there's a team component of it. And I think the amount of time that we as individuals, as adults, are in an individual context as opposed to a team context is really limited, unless you don't have any friends or family or work at, like completely by yourself. It's virtually impossible to not take those translatable skills into adulthood and work and family and everything else. So it's such a great thing to focus on, which is great. I mean, it's a great idea that you have with that focal point. I would say, my experience too is that, they're developing a lot of tools that are intangibles. And as parents, you have to be willing to subjugate your own desire for them to be the number one kid on the team or whatever it is that you have, and sort of focus on them developing and keying in on that developmental component to almost everything until they're really towards the end of college. Like there's a lot of development, and if you are fortunate to play in the pros, you have to continue to develop. So I think that's a important component as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes some effort, in my opinion, on the part of the parent to look past the sport and look at the overarching development of the kid. If my kid knows how to deal with failure, if he's a good teammate, if he learns to work with difficult people, if he learns to listen to the coach, even if they're not very nice, all those qualities transfer to life. And so if
Yeah,
you can look beyond that every year, I think at least it helps. I've been
yeah,
in situation. Yeah, obviously that's always a number one goal: make them better people. Obviously, but I know that sometimes when you're caught up in the sport, it stinks when your kid's not playing good, or he's on the bench and all the other things. But at least if you keep that mentality of, if we focus on the things that he can get better at, like, all right, learn to be a little more coachable, learn to be a little more patient. If I can at least combine it with that, at least it makes the bad stuff a lot more tolerable, and
yeah,
I'm not just so worried that my kid is not the best. Well, but at least my kid is learning patience, or at least my kid is learning to be coachable. You got to have that that mindset, because I think parents need to work on their mindset too. It's not just the mental health, and not just for the kids, from the athletes, it's for the parents as well. They got to have
yeah,
the right perspective on what their kids are getting out of the sport, and how are they facilitating it. If you
yes,
walk off the field and you're criticizing the coach in front of your kid, and then your kid is talking about the coach, and so now you're teaching your kid that it's okay to criticize your boss, or your coach, or your teacher, and then I guarantee you, part of that situation, the kid was responsible for, some way, shape, or form. Because at the end of the day, if you play good, you wouldn't have that situation.
yeah,
so, but you got to teach your kids. They're like, no, man, let's not talk about your coach. You know what? Let's not talk about the umpires. Let's talk about what you can do better. You know what? You didn't make that was a bad. You had 2 strikes. You swung at a ball in the dirt. That's what you need to be focusing on, not because the umpire called the bad strike. Oh, you called the bad
right,
strike, man. So what? Uh, so the parents always, I feel like it takes effort on the parents' part too, to look beyond the sport and look at the
yeah,
intangibles, because the parents are the ones responsible for the kids in the long run anyways. All those guys got that. that we talked about their character, when they get to the high levels, that stuff comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
Those kids didn't just grow up and just magically become bad character guys. That stuff develops over time. I mean, stuff happens, experiences, parents, no parents, whatever it is. But they didn't
Yeah.
grow, that didn't come up overnight. So that stuff came from somewhere. So if you're a parent that's involved in the sport, I think take it as a responsibility. You know what? I want my kid, my son, my daughter to be the most coachable, high character athlete that they could be. And if they're physically good, great. You know, but I want my kid to be the best person on that team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Well, I
right.
think,
Yeah.
I don't know if you had more to add on the youth sports, or Gunnar, do you have any other questions?
No, I haven't parented anyone through youth sports, so
I'm going to tell you, it's hard.
I'm sure it is. I can only imagine. Yeah.
Gunnar will give me an A plus because I always got it right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you have any other things you'd like to add, Jose, or that would be helpful?
Yeah. One phrase that I like is, be committed to what your sport is, be committed to what you're trying to get good at, but don't be attached.
Mm.
Sometimes we as athletes, we want to be good, and we're so focused on being better, and then we just get attached to all these things that are gadgets, or uh your mindset. I'm good at this, but when you're really not, or I want to do this, but that's not right. You want to be committed to being good, but you always have to be ready to shift and detach from things that don't work. All right, this doesn't work. I'm going to do this. That didn't work. I'm going to do this. All right, good. I'm going to keep this part right here. I'm going to keep this one, and I'm going to keep going. I'm going to add to it. And so being committed to being good, but don't be attached to one thing, because you never know what's really going to work for you. And you're constantly evolving as a person, as an athlete, and you got to be committed to. There's a difference between commitment and attachment. When you're committed, you're able to shift and adapt and be fluid. But when you're attached, when something doesn't work, now everything goes out the window, and I'm a failure, and I can't get better, and whatever. So I really like that phrase: be committed, but don't be attached to anything.
That's fantastic. I love that. That's a great mindset for life.
Yeah.
It's it'll help you to evolve rather than get stuck.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thanks so much for your time, Jose. Really great to see you and talk to you. Appreciate your insights. And you have such a huge wealth of knowledge on both the personal and parenting and professional level. So appreciate all that. And, I thank you. So,
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
what episode is this, Gunnar?
This was number 8.
Episode 8, going D1, Real Recruiting Stories with Jose Vazquez. I'm Joel Grun for Joel and Gunnar Grun. And thanks everyone for listening.
For watching. Thanks for listening. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.